This is my 1 week review of the Seiko Alpinist GMT. We're going to talk about the exterior and interior of the watch, what I like and what I don't like about it. And I also have here with me some watches from my personal collection that we're going to use as a reference. These watches are mostly cheaper than the Alpinist GMT, but I do have one that's also a GMT and a bit more expensive. Let's start with the exterior. The watch is using a sapphire crystal that's ever so slightly domed, and for me to be able to tell that it's domed is I use the reflection as a reference to see how the crystal is distorting the light. If it's domed, it's usually going to mean that the reflection is going to be smaller if you compare it to a flat crystal. So if I get my Tissot PRX, you'll see that this light source is going to be much larger. Yeah, so that's how you know it's a that's how you know it's a domed sapphire crystal. But again, it's ever so slightly domed. You can only tell that it is when you move it, to around this angle. And a properly domed sapphire crystal, usually this light source will be much smaller. So here is a sample. It's barely, like half the size of the Alpinist. Next one I want to talk about would be the hour markers. So if we compare this to the old Alpinist, that's not a GMT, well, the white version, it has these indices labeled on the 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12. Here, it's just every 3 hours, which in my opinion, I like it because it looks more balanced in my point of view. What I don't like is that the date window is squeezed into this 4:30 position. It feels like an afterthought. Maybe the circular shape doesn't make sense for me, or I don't know, something feels weird about this. Next would be the labels or the text they put on the dial. I like all the text on the outer. I think they call this the chaptering. I like how they what's this? They printed, or is this a print? I don't know what they did, but I like these GMT hour markers. But just note that the bezel doesn't rotate. The compass does, but it's still having the issue Seiko had in their old Alpinist. So if you look at the north, it's perfectly aligned because I moved it manually. But when we look down to the south, it's kind of off the mark. So they still haven't fixed that. Another thing I don't like about the text is they put, in my opinion, this unnecessary GMT automatic 3 days, 20 bar, all of that. I think they could have just removed that entire thing, and then they move the Prospex logo down there. So just Seiko at the top and then the Prospex logo at the bottom. One thing to note would be the sunburst white dial. I think it is slightly better than their entry-level sunburst dials. So here's an entry-level Seiko with a sunburst dial. And what you will usually see from entry-level Seiko sunbursts is that it's kind of faint. Like there will be some angles where you can't even tell that it's a sunburst dial, right? So usually the light has to hit it in a specific way for you to tell that it's sunburst. Here on the implementation of the Alpinist GMT, well, if the light's not hitting it at all, you won't see the sunburst. But in my opinion, the sunburst here is a bit more pronounced. So I think that's a good thing and an expected thing when you pay so much for a Seiko. But to give you an example of what a more pronounced sunburst would look like, here's the Longines Spirit GMT. And usually when you just turn it like this, or spin it around like this, you're gonna see that sunburst really play with the dial. And I don't think I see that with the Alpinist GMT. Maybe because it's white. Unfortunately, I don't have the other colors to really compare. I mean, you can still see the sunburst effect. The next thing I want to talk about is that this uses the 6R54 movement, which has a beat frequency of 3 Hertz, which is actually low for this price point, but I guess it's fine. What's really a downside though is that this is using an office or a collar GMT versus a true GMT. At this price point, you would want to expect a true GMT, but hey, you know, if you really like the design, that is not gonna be a deal breaker. Next would be the bracelet. Obviously, this is an aftermarket bracelet. If anyone's curious where I bought this one's from Bass & Lokes. But you can also find a lot of decent bracelets from D-Lugs. Okay, the reason why I moved away from the bracelet is because I was not happy with the quality that it, you know, of the bracelet. Compared to this Seiko Dress KX, okay, it has a very similar 3-link design. The steel on the Alpinist is just slightly darker than this, so definitely they're using a different, maybe alloy or whatever to get that color. And then it has some upgrades compared to these entry-level Seiko watches. So number one, the Alpinist is using a solid end link, which just usually means it's gonna have, well, it should have a better fit. And then long term, it's not going, you know, you don't have to worry about, you know, after maybe 100 strap changes, maybe the fit of this would be slightly loose or whatnot. So usually that's why you want to get a solid end link. And then in terms of the clasp, the Alpinist uses a milled clasp. By the way, this one is a stamped clasp. A milled clasp would look like this. So this bracelet is from Strap Code. And the other reason why I moved away from the stock bracelet is because it only has 2 levels of micro adjust, like their entry-level Seiko watches. So Seiko is kind of known for having bad bracelets. I don't know yet when they will improve, but the nice thing about it is that they have, well, Strap Code likes making Seiko bracelets. As I mentioned, this one's a Strap Code bracelet, and they usually have a lot. So this one's 5 points of micro adjust, so you can always get the perfect fit. I did order a Strap Code bracelet for this Alpinist, but I don't know yet if it'll fit, because I ordered it from the old, you know, the old non-GMT model. This one is slightly thicker, but all the other dimensions are identical. So I'm hoping that it will fit, and I'm hoping that the thickness of the movement is only shown, or is only present here on the back or somewhere on the front. And that's it. If you have any questions, well, let me know.